Stop running down the meh and mundane hallways of life and tap into the magical. My name is Michelle Shutter. I am a life and leadership coach for women and host of the Life Coaching Classroom podcast. I'd like to welcome you to Life Coaching Classroom, where we walk with you in the hallways of life so you can align to the beautiful expansiveness of your true self through reconnection, reinvention, and rejuvenation. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to class. Welcome back to this week's episode 56 on the Life Coaching Classroom podcast. My name is Michelle Shutter, and I am a life and leadership coach for women. I am the host of this podcast and the creator of Life Coaching Classroom. If you haven't checked out the website, it's been updated. You're going to love it, and you're going to want to check on library because there's a bunch of tools and resources there for you to fill your backpack. Why not start filling your backpack with all the goodness and all the tools and the resources where you can utilize to experience the greatness that is waiting for you. Stop living just the living life and really tap into your unlived life, because that's where your true, authentic self wants to go. So today, the topic, as I mentioned, is there a punisher in your story? And I was listening to a podcast by Brene Brown. She was interviewing Father Richard Rohr, and he's the author of Breathing Underwater, Spirituality, and 12 Steps. And he brought up a point about punishing versus healing. And when I heard that, I was like, just that whole the way he presented it was like, I have to stop and pause today and really dive into this and see what is ready to be revealed to me. And so I pulled out my journal, and the title of my page was Punishing Patterns. And, I journaled this beautiful journaling piece. And then I went into meditation and just allowed all of that to be integrated, to assimilate all of that awareness that came up for me. And a lot of times when we think of punishment, we think of a teacher perhaps punishing us if we didn't follow the rules, or, did something at recess, or perhaps it's a parent punishing us, or perhaps, it's a coach punishing because, you were late to practice, or whatever, right? There's consequences for our choices, of course. But yet, as an adult, as we move through childhood and adolescence and teenage years, as an adult, we still have this piece of us that wants to punish ourselves. And yet the punisher isn't a parent. It isn't a teacher. It isn't a coach. Like, the punisher is us. It's ourself. And yet when you think about that, it sounds so silly. Like, why on earth would we punish ourselves? And so I want to share with you just like kind of three different things that kind of came to mind today around that, and see what lands for you. And first of all, it's that piece of hardaholic tendencies. We have this tendency, which has actually become our identity in some way, to be a hardaholic. It's the pushing, the grind, the hustling. Nothing comes easy. I got to work harder. I'm not doing enough. I'm not being enough. And all of that, like when you feel into that energy, it's a frantic energy. It's almost like a panicky energy. It's an energy that isn't sustaining. Like, it's an energy that leads to burnout. So essentially, if we're in this hardaholic tendency and it leads to burnout, like, that's how we're punishing ourselves, right? We're moving into burnout. The second thing that I want to bring to light is this whole piece of, it's easier to punish ourselves than to feel the guilt that may surface, because potentially we're letting somebody down. And so we punish ourselves in a way to avoid feeling something else. And a lot of times it's guilt that comes up, right? Like, I shouldn't be doing this for myself. I should be doing this for this person or my child, or I shouldn't put myself as a priority. I should have everybody else before. And what a bogus story that is, right? Like, how do you serve anybody else in your life and make an impact or improve their life in any way when you have not made yourself a priority? So again, like, we punish ourselves. And yet we feel like we're doing the right thing, or we feel like we're making an impact because we've put everybody else first. But yet behind all of that, not only is there guilt, there's resentment because we haven't prioritized ourselves and we haven't put ourselves at the forefront. Imagine the amount of energy that could be transformed and utilized in a different way if you were in a space of putting yourself first rather than feeling the guilt and the resentment that comes from not putting yourself first, which then also leads into this third point. So we have the hardaholic tendencies. We have this, it's easier to punish ourselves than to feel any kind of feeling that comes up. And the third thing that came up, and this one came up, pretty strongly in my journaling today, was, the whole piece of disappointing somebody else, and particularly a parent. Now, I want to share with you a story from my childhood, which again, like, I was a little girl, like, not proud of this story by any means, but it created a great awareness for me. So I had to be in about, I don't know, fourth or fifth grade, maybe third. I can't imagine I was that little, but fourth or fifth grade seems to kind of ring in my mind right now. And I had longer hair, and I wanted to have pigtails in my hair. I wanted to have a nice straight part in the back. And so I grabbed my mom's mirror, the mirror that I wasn't supposed to be using. And I was trying to use the mirror on the wall and then hold the other mirror so that I could see the back of my head and make a nice straight part. Well, the mirror slipped either out of my hand, or I had it on the sink and knocked it off, and it shattered into like pieces, 100 pieces, right? Like, it was not repairable. And I vividly remember this feeling. I vividly remember everything about it. Like, my little mind attached such a meaning to this, and it captured everything in color, right? It captured it vibrantly and has been stored in my memory rather than just capturing it as a moment in black and white and like move on. I can tell you, like, I had this red and white little tank top on that tied up on the shoulders. It had like some triangles on it. I had like shorts to match. I had these blue and kind of yellow striped tennis shoes on. And I was mortified that I broke this, like, that I was disappointing my mom in such a deep way. And I wanted to run. I wanted to avoid it. It was easier for me, easier to handle the pain of the situation, to take myself out of the situation rather than to see the disappointment in my mom and to experience some punishment from her because I disappointed her. So here's what I did. My little mind thought that I could escape this by essentially, quote unquote, running away. Okay. So I pulled out a suitcase, and again, it was a little gray suitcase. It zipped, and then it had a zipper pocket. It was mostly gray, and it had kind of like yellow and blue small flowers like all over it. It had a hard gray handle. And again, like, it's so vivid in my mind. And I don't recall what I packed in the suitcase, but I packed the suitcase and I left without anybody knowing. And I started walking to my grandparents' house, which was, I don't know, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles away. So here is this little girl walking in the neighborhoods along these streets. And one of the streets was rather busy. It got, enough traffic, and carrying a suitcase, right? Like, no alarms going off for anybody there, right? And so I walked by actually a friend of mine, her house, and her brother was outside. And I remember stopping and talking to him and asking, like, why do you have the suitcase? Like, where are you going? And I just, kind of dismissed it. Like, I'm just going to my grandma and grandpa's. Oh, I'm bringing this to my grandma and grandpa's. And but I know that his spidey sense was up, like something isn't quite right here. And so I continued on my way and went to my grandparents' house. Well, they weren't home. And they always left the back door open, but this time it was locked. And come to find out, they had gone to my aunt's house, which was like an hour plus away. So they locked everything up. And so I sat on their back step for a while, waiting, hoping that they would come home. They never came home. And so then I was like, okay, again, my mind is thinking it's going to be easier to avoid going home versus experiencing that disappointment. And so I left and I was going to walk like all the way through town here now, carrying a suitcase, and I was going to go to the park and I was going to spend some time in the park and potentially like the night in the park if I had to. Well, lo and behold, as I'm driving or as I'm walking to the park, here comes my mom in the car. She had no idea that I was even gone, but she had gone to my grandparents for something and then drove this way home and saw me walking along the road. And I remember like I didn't even want to get in the car. Like I was just beside myself because I didn't want to face that. Um, Long story short, I went home. I know I had a consequence and everything, but here's what, kind of started all of that. Like we have events in our childhood that it's a foundational event, and every event, and I know I've referred to this before on this podcast, it's like a magnet. So anytime I have a feeling or a thought that's similar to this foundational event, it magnetically draws it and makes it like almost even more powerful. And so as you go through life, I want to avoid disappointing other people, right? So how do you do that? A lot of times you become like the good girl. You people please, right? And yet all at the same time, you're punishing yourself because you're not healing some of the past, what I would call like heart hurts, right? Things that made your heart hurt, or things that just impacted you deeply in a way. And so we're carrying almost this punisher identity as an adult, and yet we don't even realize it. And this punisher, you yourself, has become part of your story. And at some point, you have to make the decision, are you going to rise above that story? Like, what if we could transform the punisher in this story and transform this punisher to the healer? What if we could create healing in our story? Because if you tap into the feeling, the energy of punishing, just feel what that is like in your body. Like for me, it's heavy. It almost creates an anxiousness in me. But when I tap into the feeling, the energy of healing, even though it may bring up a hurt, even though I may have to face something that I haven't wanted to face, it feels lighter. I know that it's temporary. I know that that bogus story can dissolve and I can transform that energy into something else. And so that feels so much lighter to me. Now, back to Father Rohr, as he was talking on this podcast, he had talked about, that there's just so many religions and different aspects, life experiences where they lead with punishing rather than healing. And so I want to ask you, where are you creating an awareness based on what I've shared with you today around punishing versus healing? Have you been the punisher in your story? And if so, how is it serving you? Are you willing to continue to have the punisher be part of your story? Or are you ready to transform it and be the healer in the story? Because this whole piece of self-discovery and doing the inner work and self-mastery, like that's it. That healing is a huge part of it. Healing is so important that it's actually one of the 6 H's in the reinvention process that I teach my clients. And I know that it may sound scary. I know that it may sound intimidating to dive into, but when you are supported with a coach and a community, it is less intimidating. It is less scary. It becomes empowering to you. It allows you to break down the bogus stories so that you can break through. You can't have a breakthrough without going through the breakdown. And what I want you to do is just give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to stop being the punisher, or at the very least, to take a time out from being the punisher. Go on recess with the healer. Let the punisher stay along the wall. Let the punisher be in the timeout at recess time. And become the healer in your story. It is a piece that is missing, and you deserve to bring it back. So if you are in a space where you are ready to rise above that punishing story, and you want to know how to do that, I want to extend an invitation to you to register today, right now, for the upcoming unit study in December called Rise Above Your Story. We start next Monday, the 19th, and it is an opportunity for you where I open the classroom and you can experience life coaching at absolutely no charge. Rise above your story. Rise above the punisher, because it no longer serves you. Draw the line in the sand and just know that when you cross that line, when you register, cross the line and register for Rise Above Your Story, it is going to make a significant change in your life. And you can register at lifecoachingclassroom.com/unit. So as I wrap up today, I shared a little bit about my story, about the disappointment. I shared 3 different ways how we really have a tendency to punish ourselves. Is there more? Absolutely. But the hardaholic tendencies, we believe it's easier to feel some other feeling or it's easier to punish ourselves rather than feel some other feeling like guilt. And we punish ourselves because we've disappointed someone. In all actuality, we can't really choose that feeling for that person. That person chooses the feelings. And that's a big aha right there. Like, you can't make someone feel that way. They choose the thought, they choose the feeling. Could it perhaps influence it or enhance it or something? Yes. But the end result isn't your responsibility. It's not. It's the other person's. So what are you going to do today? You are going to register for Rise Above Your Story. And you can do that at lifecoachingclassroom.com, because I can't wait to see you in class. Have an amazing day. Be an amazing you. And don't forget to drop me a message on what you received today. See you in class.
Have you joined our monthly unit study? If not, you better head on over and reserve your seat at lifecoachingclassroom.com/unit. The unit study gives you an opportunity to experience life coaching at no charge. Again, register and get all the details at lifecoachingclassroom.com/unit. I do have a favor. Could you take a moment to share this podcast and Life Coaching Classroom with your besties? Perhaps they too are tired of running down the meh and mundane hallways of life. Let's give them a little spark in their day. Finally, I'd be so grateful if you take a minute to review the podcast. The reviews definitely help to spread the podcast to more women. Thank you. I so appreciate you, and I will see you in class.